Welcome to the Audrey Dahlgren Show. Get ready. We're going on athletic adventures all over the great state of Michigan. And the show begins now. Here's your host, Audrey Dahlgren.
Good afternoon and happy Monday. We have so much to get into today when it comes to Michigan State's football team following its impressive win over the weekend against then at number 24 Miami. But before we do, I have to share my quote of the day because this is the hashtag Monday Motivation Show. And this quote comes from someone a lot of Spartan football fans, players, coaches, and former players know. Former football coach George Perlis was known for saying, "Work hard, keep your mouth shut, and good things will happen," which I believe to be entirely true. And so there's no question, though, that the current Spartan squad is working hard and they are seeing the results of their efforts with each passing Saturday. Michigan State beat Miami over the weekend, 38-17 in Miami. And one person who was in attendance at Hard Rock Stadium to witness it live was Stephen Brooks. He covers Michigan State exclusively for 24/7 Sports. He's been on the show before, but never in person yet. So, Stephen, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to be back in here. I think it'll be much better for the listeners just to have this quality. We got Alex on the sticks over there, and everything's going to go well. Much better than the phone. So, just wanted to deliver the best product for you folks.
Yeah, no, we're happy to have you in here. And it actually, too, how was the trip to Miami?
It was a good time. It was fun. I'd been to Florida a handful of times, like we were saying off the air. I'd never been down to Miami specifically, though, so got to sightsee a little bit. The highlight, the non-work highlight for sure was I got to see the hotel, the former hotel from Scarface where the chainsaw scene happens, if anybody knows what I'm talking about. It's a CVS now, which is actually really disappointing. But still, the staircase is there, and there's a little plaque that sort of commemorates it and says this was used in the filming of 1983 Scarface and blah, So I love that movie. That was cool to see. Got to see South Beach a little bit, got a feel for that. And then I was in and out. I mean, I was honestly probably only in Florida for about 24 hours, honestly. Got down there Friday night around 7 and left Saturday around 7. So but it was a good time all in all. Productive, fun, good stuff. Very productive, very fun for Michigan State, and a little productive, a little fun for me, I guess.
Well, number one, I didn't know that they had transformed it into a CVS. So
that was kind of a bummer. I was like, geez, it couldn't be a museum or like something,
right.
Or just even apartments or whatever, but a CVS, and it's all bright in there and just medical products and snacks. I'm like, this is the wrong vibe for a scene where somebody got killed by a chainsaw, but we don't have to get too far into that for our listeners. I know it's lunchtime and folks don't want to be grossed out.
Yeah, might be eating. Also, too, yes, please go into a little bit more before we break down the game itself, but go into more of what it's like when you do travel on the road, because a lot of people are under the assumption that you're just, down in South Beach having martinis or something all day.
Right. I wish it was like that. And by the time I got to South Beach, I was like, man, maybe it should be like that. But yeah, so like I said, I was in there 24 hours. Like I booked a flight Saturday night knowing and planning to just leave right from the stadium and go out. So that saves another night of hotel money. I'm very conscious of how I'm spending the company's money because they're gracious enough to send me down there and pay for this. And of course, I'm trying to deliver the content for our readers and give them something. So it is fun. Like I said, I'd wanted to go to Miami for a long time, but it is so also very focused. Like you are down there to work, and I never forget that. So I got right down there, got to the hotel, and got some stuff written. Wake up the very next day, got some stuff written, got some stuff ready. Go to the stadium, start writing. And then the second the game's over, the work is even in overdrive at that point, and all the way up. The second I got past security in airport, I pull out the laptop, keep working. So it is just nonstop. You try to mix in, like I said, a little bit of fun and everything, or sightsee, but you kind of got to pick and choose your spots too, because again, you're there for business, and that's what I try to make it about.
Hard Rock Stadium is huge, number one, but the atmosphere as well. What was the atmosphere like in terms of, because before the game started earlier in the week, last week, Mel Tucker said he anticipated that there were going to be quite a few Michigan State fans down in Miami. And so Did it seem that way? Did it seem like there was a pretty good presence?
Oh, yeah. I saw a lot of Michigan State fans, especially in the fourth quarter. They all came pouring down, and the Miami fans hit the exits pretty quick after the touchdown to Jalen Naylor there. like almost immediately. Like the ref's arms go up, and I look down, and it's just bodies flying toward the exit. But it was Michigan State fans showed out well. I thought they would, though. You know, Mel Tucker said it, of course, and we both know they have a good alumni presence down there. But also, Michigan State fans usually just show up for these big event type of things, whether it's the aircraft carrier or the Maui Classic or, you know, going out to Arizona State even or whatever. These big time events they usually show up for, and they did, and especially a big time event after a year of not being able to go to games. You know, mid-September in Michigan or Miami for the weekend. Yeah, I can do that. You know, it all made sense. And yeah, I thought they showed out pretty well. It wasn't a full stadium by any means, but it's an NFL stadium and it's not on campus, you know, so they don't really ever pack it up there unless it's like a big time night game. Like there was a time Notre Dame went in there as like a top 10 team a couple years ago and it was packed and it was like just a 4-hour rave at night there. It was, you could feel it through the TV. It was nuts. Wasn't like that. Still a good atmosphere, though. And the Miami fans, to their credit, you know, again, they weren't a huge crowd, but they made a point to get loud and make that stadium loud, as loud as they can. So there was good juice in there, you know, and then the heat and everything, it was sunny until the very end. Then it started raining a little bit. It was a good atmosphere. It was a good setting for college football.
Yeah, they showed in the broadcast, too, that where the stadium was, it was sunny. And then, like, a little bit just not that far away, they had this huge overcast of cloud that was coming in. But you know, there's so much to break down when it comes to this game, but let's just get your initial impression overall of what's the first thing or maybe one thing or two things that jumped out to you when watching Michigan State play in this game on Saturday.
Sure, I think they're both probably big picture things, really, and it's the first, I guess, would just be it's the latest sign that things look like they're heading in a pretty good direction under Mel Tucker. You know, I think we've had a lot of these little moments so far, and this is just the latest one. And look, we'll see what Miami really is, but whatever they are, you know, whether they're 500 or less or better than that, you know, that's still a win that carries weight. Miami is still a big brand. There's that logo, the turnover chain, the history, the championships, the mystique, that still matters, you know. People might not remember the particulars a couple years from now, but they'll remember, hey, they beat Miami, you know, so that means something still. And so, again, I think it's just, like I said, the latest piece of evidence that Mel Tucker has got this thing going in the right direction. He can get his team up for a big game, can get them focused, can get them prepared, you know, for a sort of an adverse environment down there, you know, not just the crowd, but the heat and all of that the preparation that went into that. And then the other thing would be the way they won this game. You know, I think look, Tucker's got a lot, and I wrote about this. He's got a lot of sayings, a lot of phrases, a lot of mottos, and, you know, not to be the company pitchman here, but they kind of embodied almost all of those. You know, you look at next play, when they go up late on the Naylor touchdown, the very next play, literally Ronald Williams picks it off. You know, that's a not too high, not too low thing, which is neutral thinking, which is another one of his things. You know, they miss a field goal. Miami comes down and scores a touchdown. Michigan State comes right back and answers with a touchdown. That's a neutral thinking, you know, type of thing. Relentless. Obviously, we all know that one. 4th and 1, they go for it with the sneak to Peyton Thorne. The very next play, they call up the deep shot. Boom, deep touchdown to Jalen Naylor, ball game instantly. And that, like I said, was the moment the Miami fans started stampeding toward the exit. So there was about 5 minutes left, 4.5 maybe. They could have given it to Kenneth Walker, you know, 5 or 6 times, tried to bleed the clock and see where it got him. No, they threw it right up and ended it right there and went for the jugular. That's relentless football. So just there's the way that they won it, I think, is just going to even further galvanize those things. And I think this team was bought in. I know that they were. I know that they believe in this stuff. But when you live it and feel it and embody it in a game against a brand name or on the road, you know, us against the world type of feeling going into that, I just think it can propel this team even further into that buy-in. You know, whatever the buy-in level was before, and again, it was high, but it's something higher now. I think when they really live those sort of teachings and philosophies and tenets that Tucker's brought over here.
Yeah, you could see that for sure. And that's something that Amber Rinestine is hopefully going to comment on as well when she joins a little bit later in the show, is the buy-in, because you have to have that too from the nutritional standpoint, especially playing in the heat down in Miami. So she may be able to, you know, let us in on that buy-in and where she sees the buy-in is in right now in the program, because you definitely did see it, as you were mentioning, all those other facets as well in the game. And you bring up Kenneth Walker. How could you not? I mean, everybody's been...
Man, he's fun to watch.
I know, right? He's been really just killing it for Michigan State's football team. 172 yards in this game against Miami. He now leads the country in rushing yards 493. But where do you see him progressing, or his ceiling in a sense, or like just watching him in that game? He just made something out of nothing, it seemed like, on a lot of his drives. A lot of the plays.
So many times. Leads the nation in rushing while having 7 carries in game 2. So it's essentially, and he had like 50 yards, but this is essentially a 2-game deal where he's leading the nation in rushing. Every time he touches the ball, he's must-see TV. I mean, you said he's making stuff out of nothing. I saw a stat the other day. He's got like 300 or 400 yards after contact already. So it's not as if he's just walking through wide open lanes. And the offensive line has played pretty well overall through 3 games. But he is making a lot happen himself, and it is fun to watch. It's exciting. I've said this a couple of times, but he reminds me of like a joystick, like a video game joystick on an arcade machine, because his body is twisting and contorting in all sorts of ways, but he keeps his base under him. His legs just keep chopping away. But and I wasn't really around. I don't really have strong memories of the height of the Barry Sanders era, but people that were around for that tell me that this is kind of what it looked like. There's shades of it. Let's not get carried away. He's not Barry Sanders, but there's shades of it. And you watch the highlights, I mean, you can see it, that stop and start, he's swallowed up, no he's not, oh he's over here, and poof, he's coming out of a cloud of smoke, and now he's over here. The agility, the speed, and he's got some power to him even. I mean, there's not a hole in his game right now that we've seen, and so I expect him to just keep producing. I mean, he is their workhorse right now. He is their difference maker. He's their guy that can get him out of a bad spot, it looks like. And as long as the offensive line stays healthy and keeps playing at this pace, the sky's the limit for him, quite honestly. I mean, I think we're looking at probably the Big Ten's leading rusher, definitely an all-conference player, and nationally, I mean, I think it's all on the table, quite honestly, and folks can sort of take that where they want.
I know, and maybe you're referring to the Heisman situation, which is a little early, obviously, to get that type of hype around it. But in the same sense, if he is leading the country right now in rushing yards, as you mentioned, because that Youngstown State game, he didn't really. I think he had under 100 yards in that game. So, but yeah, and the one thing too, I tweeted this last night because I was watching obviously the Titans and Seahawks game, and by no means is he Derrick Henry, but there are some similarities, as you mentioned, the cuts, the vision, even the way in which he carries the ball, how he's supposed to, high and tight, like a running back supposed to, but. Yeah, definitely a lot of excitement surrounding Kenneth Walker. The other thing that stood out is for a second straight week, Peyton Thorne has had 4 touchdown passes in a game. And, it's been probably Brian Lewerke, Connor Cook. It's kind of, in those days where this has been happening. And so where do you think that Peyton has grown the most from last year to this year, and how much of that is due to Jay Johnson, or just having a whole offseason, a regular offseason, to get accustomed to the offense, the scheme, and maybe Coach Johnson?
I think that last part's probably a lot of it. Just a year older, a year wiser, and for everybody. I mean, that really goes across the board just in terms of knowing what they're doing, And last year they all, put on a good face and said, oh, yeah, we learned a lot through Zoom. And sure, maybe some folks did, maybe some folks didn't, because fast forward a year later in this summer, and it's like, yeah, it's great to actually know what we're doing this year. It's like, well, you weren't saying that last year, but all right, I'll take it. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of it. I think the thing, and I don't know if this is really even new for him, but the thing that's really stuck out to me about Peyton Thorne, I think this ties directly into why he got the job, is his risk-averse decision-making. He is not making bad decisions out there. He might not be lighting it up or wowing you with his arm or, doing Patrick Mahomes type of things out there or whatever. It might not be visually, he might not make the sexy plays all the time, but he's making the smart plays almost all the time. He's not, whether it's throwing the ball away or tucking and running it when he should and just picking up a couple yards, or just avoiding putting the offense in a bad spot. He's got 9 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He hasn't fumbled it yet. He has not accounted for a turnover this year. That's massive. And it leans right, it ties also into what Mel Tucker wants to do when it's complementary football, but also leaning on the defense, playing field position, getting something out of special teams. Like, the offense isn't hurting any other facet of the operation. And we've seen how that can look when that's not happening. So I think, to me, the biggest thing for him is just, like I said, keeping them in good spots. He might not wow you, but he's not hurting you either. And more times, you play that way throughout the course of a season, good things are going to happen. Yeah,
I'm glad that you brought up the no turnovers, because that's been huge, to not have an interception through the first 3 games. But then also, too, as you're mentioning, there was a drive. I can't remember what quarter it was in, but really there was nowhere for him to throw. He didn't have anybody to throw to, but he was able to get the first down just by making a smart decision by running it and then kind of sliding to end the play. But that's another situation. I can't remember. Was that the second quarter? Third quarter?
I don't
do you remember that?
Exactly. I do exactly know the play you're talking about. I just don't remember when. But you're right though. I mean, it's I could force this, and it might be a 50-50 type of proposition, or I can just tuck it, get 3 yards or whatever, and we can live to play another down. Like, he has been very risk averse, and like I said, whether it's running or just throwing it away, we've seen him throw a ton of balls just passed over the sideline, just getting rid of it. And again, I think that has a lot to do with why he is their starting quarterback, because you see it now in games, and you keep hearing about how he's been careful with the ball, and that's obviously something Mel Tucker values, and I think that we're seeing exactly why he's the guy instead of Anthony Russo.
Yeah, it was also nice, too, to see Jalen Naylor get a little bit integrated into the mix, in a sense, because, oh, hey, by the way, if you didn't know, Peyton Thorne and Jaden Reed played with each other.
No way. No way. Tell me more about that.
Have you heard this story? They made a big deal about it on the broadcast, obviously,
I'm sure.
because, that's what happens a lot on national televised games like this. We always learn stuff a week and a half, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, prior to, but national team, they might not, pick up on that.
Sure. And I get it, but it's annoying for folks that have heard it every week. But yeah, I mean, if you're tuning in from Texas, like, oh, hey, that's kind of cool, so right. I get it.
It is kind of funny, though. It was comical watching people's tweets as you're like, oh, did you know? Did you know they played with each other? That's why their chemistry is so good. But it was really encouraging to see, like I said, Jalen Naylor get into the mix a little bit as well, because it just shows that there's a little bit more versatility when it comes to who Thorne can find in the offense in that sense. Sure.
And came back and had the big plays late after. I don't know whose fault necessarily, but there were about 2, maybe 3 throws early in the game where Thorne was looking for him and the ball was nowhere near him. So it was either Naylor read it wrong and cut off his route too soon, or Thorne read it wrong and thought he was going to go deep and stopped instead. We saw a little bit of that last year, even with Rocky Lombardi, where they have these decisions where the receiver's supposed to read his man and decide from the coverage whether he's going to cut back to the quarterback or keep going deep, and so there was some mix up there, and we saw that a little bit at Miami, but then comes back around, like you said, and his last touchdown was impressive. I mean, the way he shook his guy, he had a 5-yard cushion when he caught that ball. He just walked right into the end zone. I mean, it was a hitch and go, boom, boom, stopped, froze the guy totally and took right off. Jaden Reed's obviously had a good start to the season. We've seen Trey Mosley and Connor Hayward and other folks pick up some slack there too, but Jalen Naylor's a guy you got to have engaged and be a part of your offense for them to really maximize things. So I'm with you. It was good to see him for Michigan State's purposes to have that big game there.
And as you mentioned, you just brought up Connor Hayward, which is perfect because he is a guy who I think isn't getting enough pub or credibility for what he's doing right now for Michigan State's football team.
Probably so.
I mean, because that block that he had for Jaden Reed, the final touchdown of the game, I mean, that touchdown doesn't happen if it's not for Connor Hayward and his blocking. And that's something a lot of people, I have been wanting to hear about, is more about Connor Hayward and why he's been able to make such a difference in that area.
Yeah. And that's not something, he had to do a lot as a running back. So that's, more than anything, that's the newest part of what he's being asked to do now as a tight end is line right up and just smash the guy in front of you. I mean, of course he had to block as a running back on pass pro and everything, but not in the same way a tight end has to block, and not usually blocking the same guys a tight end has to block. So he's obviously comfortable with the ball in his hands. We've seen him catch, we've seen him run and do those things, but that's a new part of his game, and he's had some good moments, even going back to Northwestern, where he's sealing an edge. And it's funny because I know that he was not exactly a fan favorite early in his career.
Right.
And now he's sort of become this beloved figure for just sort of being that selfless throwback dude. You see him blocking, putting his body on the line. I think folks know, that's not really his strong suit. That's not really what he definitely hasn't come up in the game doing that, Mm-hmm. And so they see that, and he's made some plays. He's made some nice catch and run type of things. I think he's now sort of become this little cult hero almost, early on. Which is interesting, like I said, because the public opinion of him has shifted quite a bit, and that's good to see. It's good to see for him as a veteran guy, because he was not, with all due respect, he was not going to have a role at running back, and we see why. Good for him for being willing to do that And good on the coaches for finding a way and recognizing his talents and say, hey, he can help us here. And he is, so good stuff all the way around. Nice little redemption story for him. He's going to go out, and he's a guy who has a lot of respect on this team, can bring a lot to this team from a leadership and knowledge standpoint. Good to see him have a role, on his last the last stretch of his career here and make something out of it.
Yeah, and another guy who he's young, but he's had a great game on Saturday. And you tweeted something about Charles Brantley that I would like for you to share when it came to his high school coach and just the kind of player that he is, because there was not a scary moment, but there was a moment where he almost got kicked out of the game for targeting. Obviously, the call was overturned, but if you could go into more of that story. Yeah,
so whenever Charles Brantley came in known as a hitter, I talked to his high school coach last fall, and she said Chuck plays cornerback like a linebacker, and that sort of tells you everything. And you're like, okay, well, he's not the biggest dude. If you've ever seen him in person, he's pretty small, and that's probably the reason why he's not in the starting lineup. He's just a little slight out there to play a full 60, 70 snaps at the Big Ten level. But we have seen that physicality. I mean, he puts his shoulder into people. He can knock them back, which is pretty surprising for being how small he is. So he packs a lot of punch in that frame. And so, yeah, I mean, that just speaks to exactly what he's been. I thought he played pretty well. And he was out there against Rambo, number 11, the dude who kind of lit them up most of the first half. Had a career high, I think 12 catches or whatever. Really good player, transfer from Oklahoma. Here's a true freshman out there going back down to Florida. He's guarding him, and he's just not scared. He like you said, if you're physical like that as a freshman at his size, that shows you're not scared. And if you're not scared out there playing corner, you can make a lot happen. And that's obviously not even getting into everything else that makes him a good player there or gives him potential to be a good player there. But really promising, and on a day when I didn't think the corners in general played too well, he was kind of a bright spot, and I think we're going to see a lot more of him moving forward. Just not in the first half of this week because he did get the ejection, so he's out for the first half now.
He did end up getting it.
He did. Angelo Gross has got overturned.
Okay, that was the one.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
But we will see a lot more of Chuck Brantley.
Yeah. As Xavier Henderson likes to say too, he's like 100 and something pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
Chucky Wucky is his nickname, by the way, in case anybody didn't know that. But yes, yeah, you're right. So yeah, he ended up getting it, but Angelo Gross was the one where okay. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Stephen, great stuff. Thank you for coming in studio. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Always happy to.
And yeah, we'll just see how this plays out against Nebraska now. Up next, night game at Spartan Stadium.
I think, maybe I should have said this earlier when you asked me big picture stuff. But I mean, what does that Miami win do? I think it allows Michigan State fans to start dreaming a little bit because you look at Nebraska and I don't think anybody's scared of them. No one's going to be scared of Western Kentucky. Rutgers, they look pretty solid, but I mean, are we talking about 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, going into Michigan undefeated? I mean, I think you can truly start dreaming a little big right now if you're a Michigan State fan, and that's fun time to be in.
And speaking of that, so Ralph Russo from the Associated Press, he's been covering college football for the AP since 2005. He's going to be joining us after the break, and that's something that we will touch upon with him is when it comes to the rankings, Michigan State is now ranked for the first time in over 2 years. So what needs to happen for them to continue to climb in these rankings? As Stephen mentions, keep getting that undefeated record, 5-0, 6-0. Who knows? So we'll be joined with Ralph Russo after the break when we come back, and we'll see you then.
HBO Max's ad-free monthly subscription is available at a 50% discount for $7.50 per month for up to a half a year. The move comes after Warner Media pulled HBO Max from Amazon Prime Video channels, potentially losing 5 million customers in the process. Warner says it's trying to grow a closer relationship with its viewers and also removed HBO Max as premium add-ons on Apple TV and Roku. Google TV on Chromecast could soon start offering some free channels. It currently acts as an aggregator for various streaming apps with personalized content recommendations. The FBI says that in the first 7 months of the year, its Internet Crime Complaint Center received more than 1,800 complaints related to online romance scams that resulted in losses totaling $133 million. A lot of the scams have to do with getting people to invest in what turns out to be bogus cryptocurrency opportunities. Tech Report, Larry Olson, NBC News Radio.
NBC News Radio, I'm Michael Kastner. Northport, Florida police and the FBI are inside Brian Laundrie's house. He's a person of interest in the case of his missing fiancée, Gabby Petito. Police believe they found her body inside Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming yesterday.
Human remains were discovered, consistent with the description of Gabby Petito.
FBI agent Charles Jones also offered condolences to the family in making the announcement. The 22-year-old disappeared in August on a cross-country road trip with her partner, Laundrie, who returned to Florida but has now gone missing. Police are no longer looking for Laundrie in the Carlton Reserve Forest in Florida. Pfizer says its COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective for children ages 5 to 11 years old. Sarah Lee Kessler reports.
It's not the same strength as the Pfizer COVID vax approved for people 12 and up. But Dr. Bill Gruber, Pfizer's senior VP, told NBC's Today Show it works just as well in younger children as it does in teens and young adults.
1/3 of the adult dose works just right for children to minimize the potential for side effects and provide the potential for protection.
2 shots would still be required. Pfizer says it plans to seek emergency use authorization for younger children and will submit its data to the FDA by the end of the month.
The Senate parliamentarian says that Democrats won't be able to use their $3.5 trillion spending package to pave the way to citizenship. Mike Bauer reports.
Elizabeth McDonough, who as parliamentarian interprets the Senate rules, wrote, "Changing the law to clear the way to legal permanent resident status is tremendous and enduring policy change that dwarfs any potential budgetary impact. The ruling comes as a crushing setback for millions of immigrants as well as Democrats looking to craft major immigration reform. It closes off a pathway to permanent residency or citizenship for, by some estimates, around 6 million people."
Wall Street is deeply in the red to start the week. The Dow is down nearly 500 points in early trading. Michael Kastner, NBC News Radio.
Lamar Jackson finally has a win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Jackson picked up a crucial 4th and 1 late. The Ravens defeated the Chiefs 36-35 in a thriller in Baltimore. Jackson threw for 239 yards and a touchdown, also rushing for 107 yards and 2 scores on the ground. Patrick Mahomes threw for 343 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. It was a wild Sunday of NFL action. 7 teams remain undefeated. The Rams, 49ers, Raiders, Panthers, Broncos, Cardinals, and Buccaneers all improved to 2-0 with victories. The Titans mounted a big second-half comeback to top the Seahawks in overtime, 33-30. It was a frustrating day for Carson Wentz. The Indianapolis Colts quarterback rolled his ankle in a 27-24 loss late in the game at home against the LA Rams. And the San Francisco 49ers had 3 running backs go down Sunday as San Francisco beat the Philadelphia Eagles 17-11. That's sports. I'm Seth Everett.
Welcome back to the Audrey Dahlgren Show.
It's my team. It's my quarterback.
The Spotlight Radio Network.
With its win over Miami, Michigan State is also now ranked in the AP Top 25 for the first time in almost 2 years. Spartans are up to number 20 in the AP rankings and number 21 in the coaches poll. And these are always released on Sundays, following Saturday, game days on Saturdays. It's also the first time they've been ranked in Mel Tucker's tenure. It's why Ralph Russo is joining us. He's been covering college football for the Associated Press since 2005. And Ralph, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Audrey. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for being a voter.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. It's very good. I really do. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. And I know before Saturday's game against Miami, everyone had a feeling the Spartans would be ranked if they were able to get the dub, which they did. But so I would say this, though, for them to come in at number 20, is that justified for MSU this week?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they've been pretty impressive here. If you look at, listen, I know Miami looks a little like damaged goods here, but they were a preseason ranked team. They're a pretty talented bunch, and you're going on the road here. And not only do you beat them, relatively close game, but you sort of put them away at the end with a pretty big rush. Listen, I've been really impressed with what I've seen with Michigan State. Again, not just winning, but winning each game by scoring in the 30s, winning each game by double digits. Again, not really messing around much with teams. They will face much tougher competition in the Big Ten East, which looks particularly loaded right now. If Michigan has its act together and Penn State is good, and, listen, I know Ohio State is having some issues, but it's still Ohio State. So, yeah, I think 20 sounds about right for Mel Tucker. And I got to say, like I said, I've been pretty impressed and think that this team is a little ahead of schedule, which has got to make folks in East Lansing pretty happy.
Well, you kind of did. You just answered my second question, because I did want to know what your thoughts were on MSU as a whole and kind of what they've been able to do through the first 3 games of the season, and especially on Saturday against the Canes. But as you say that they're ahead of schedule, is there anything else you can pinpoint or, point to when you say that they're ahead of schedule?
Yeah, I thought last year, listen, nobody had a more difficult hand, except for maybe Carl Durrell, who replaced Mel Tucker at Colorado. But I don't know if anybody had a more difficult hand than Mel Tucker was dealt last year among new coaches, coming in so late to a program that, clearly was in flux, and then still managing to win a couple of games last year. My feeling was like, you know what? It was a nice job, but I'm still going to give Mel Tucker 2021 as sort of like, okay, we're still building here. This is almost like year one. Maybe it's year 1A. The fact that they've gotten all these transfers in here and made such great strides so quickly, it frankly was a little startling to me. To get, again, you always worry if you're going to bring that many transfers in. Is the team going to gel? Are you going to get the chemistry? But that seemingly has been there. The other thing I'd like to be super encouraged on is a lot of times defensive coordinators can be a little bland, like trying to figure out what their offense wants to be. They tend to coach offense like they are defensive coordinators.
Yeah.
And that certainly hasn't been the case. I mean, they're playing with tempo. They're getting big plays. Kenneth Walker looks like a Heisman Trophy candidate. I mean, there's been so many positive things in a year where I thought, okay, let's see what happens with Michigan State. Let's see how this all comes together. And again, maybe if they get to a bowl game, that's a good start for Mel Tucker.
What's also intriguing, too, Ralph, is that before the season started, Michigan State didn't receive any votes in the AP preseason poll or rankings, but that kind of speaks to nobody really knew what to expect, I would say. And I don't know if you can comment on that as well. And maybe that's, nobody knew with all, like you mentioned, all the transfers and just different components here. Maybe people didn't know how good or what Michigan State was working with.
No, I think that's exactly it. I think it was so I think a big theme of this year in general throughout college football is, what did we see last year? How meaningful was it, right? Because last year was just a mess, right, in many ways, especially out of the Big Ten and the Pac-12 teams who had abbreviated seasons. So even more so with those teams, there was this thought of should I take anything from 2020? Are we building off, or was that just all COVID related and, let's throw it away? So especially so with a new coach, again, like Mel Tucker. So, yeah, I think there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of what are we doing here with Michigan State? I think even the people who were optimistic thought, well, sure, this could work out in the long run, but what exactly will 2021 be? And again, that's why I'm saying to see them operating so competently and efficiently, 3 games into the season, it has to make you feel good if you're a Spartans fan.
So now the next question is, obviously they're ranked, as I mentioned, for the first time in nearly 2 years. Nebraska comes to town to East Lansing on Saturday. And so what does Michigan State have to do now in order to move up in the poll? Is there a certain way in which they need to win the game on Saturday, or how can they boost up in the rankings?
Yeah, it's so funny how it shifts, right? You go from a team that nobody really thought much about coming into the season. Now you're 3-0. You've beaten Miami. You've blown out Miami when you were an underdog. Now Nebraska is going to come to town, and just like that, everything shifts to now. Oh no, now Michigan State's the favorite, and Nebraska is okay, 2-2. They've won a couple of games against poor competition, so. Now you're going to be expected to not just win, but win impressively. And I think, listen, I think that they've got the potential to still have a really nice ceiling. I would still be, maybe caution a little bit. Like there are still probably going to be some growing pains here. But yeah, it's just interesting to see the way it flips now. And now Michigan State will be a favorite. And if they were to struggle against Nebraska, does that give folks pause, right? If they struggle at home against a team like Nebraska, which before the season you would have looked at that game and go, boy, like, maybe that's a toss-up, maybe that's one we can steal, and now it's a game they're expected to win, which is also an interesting, shift on Mel Tucker and the team, right? Isn't this now a team that's now, you're ranked? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the expectations and sort of being the favorite as opposed to the underdog?
And what's also, you can't ignore this, is the fact that Nebraska fans travel extremely well. So even though it's a home game, there's a situation where Nebraska's going to want to come in, pull off the upset, as Michigan State wanted to pull off the upset last week in Miami. So you kind of take that into account. But also, Ralph, who do you think right now is the best team in the Big Ten through the first 3 weeks? Because Iowa checks in at the top at number 5. Penn State's right behind them at 6. As you mentioned, Ohio State, not what used to seen when it comes to Ohio State right now at 10. Wisconsin's at 18, Michigan at 19, and then Michigan State at 20.
Yeah, super difficult question, frankly, because I've seen the last 2 weeks I was at Iowa State for the Iowa State game, so saw Iowa in person. I was at Penn State this past weekend, saw Penn State in person. Was pretty impressed with Penn State. Boy, Iowa is very tough defensively, but boy, their offense is a grind. So it is really. So I know they're number 5 in the country, but I don't know if you can be number 5 in the country for a long period of time when your quarterback is averaging about 6 yards per pass. It's just that seems a little limiting to me. I will still default to Ohio State, mostly very tentatively, mostly on the premise of I know they have the most talented players. Their defense is a mess. I think C.J. Stroud is a good quarterback, but is probably going to be asked to do a lot with that type of defense. I think Ohio State is really vulnerable. But I will still default to the Buckeyes because I know that they have the most weapons and the most talent. But the gap between Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten is a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be coming into this season.
Is there a certain reason why you feel that way?
Oh, just because of what results on the field so far, right? I mean, it's only 3 games, small sample, but again, Michigan and Michigan State, again, not necessarily against the greatest of competition, but Michigan State's played some capable teams. I think that those teams are just operating at a higher level. I mean, Penn State already has a win against Auburn and Wisconsin, so I can make the case that nobody in the Big Ten has accomplished more than Penn State already this early in the season, and they've got some pretty good players too. But I think that the expectation was, boy, Ohio State, they're a monster. They're just bringing in these 4s and 5 stars. Sure, they'll have a little slip, while replacing Justin Fields, but there's a lot of talent there, and they should still be a team that should contend for a playoff spot. Whereas there were questions about Michigan, questions about Michigan State, questions about Penn State and Wisconsin. All these teams were coming off of seasons where you were like, well, what do we know about them? What do we see about them last year? Well, for the first 3 weeks, all of those teams have answered their questions positively, while Ohio State, you've seen questions answered, not so positively. Let's put it that way.
And then you said you were at the Penn State game. So what's the biggest takeaway with them right now after watching them against Auburn and the strength of the Nittany Lions?
So against Auburn, they protected the passer great, and Sean Clifford played the best game of his career. He was poised. He tends to get a little happy feet. He tends to create sacks sometimes. Mm-hmm. You will see sometimes we blame that on the offensive line, but he tends to create sacks by being a little wayward in the pocket sometimes. He played really well. Again, they protected him really well, and they look like they've got a really nice defense with some real playmakers in the back end, like Jaquan Brisker, who made the play that sort of ended the game. I just, after coming off of a 4-5 year, I think it was 4-5 last year, losing their first 5. All these ideas about, well, again, going back to what we talked about with Michigan State, was that real last year? Mm-hmm. Was that just a crazy COVID year? I think there were so many questions about whether that was an anomaly, and so quickly Penn State has sort of shown that, that was probably just an anomaly, a weird year gone awry. And there's a lot about Penn State, I think that they're in this for the long run. Again, the Big Ten looks really, really strong, and I could see having a hard time producing a team that loses, that goes undefeated in the conference. I have a hard time seeing that happening this year, because I'm looking at 4, 5, 6 teams that might be able to win it.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a gauntlet, that's for sure. So I appreciate you, coming on the show, spitting your knowledge, and it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. Anytime.
All right, the great Ralph Russo. He writes incredible pieces and does a phenomenal job when it comes to covering college football, and definitely knows the ins and outs and the in-betweens and everything that's going on. So it'll be very interesting, though. As he mentioned, yes, Big Ten is going to be a gauntlet this year, and 6 teams ranked in the top 25 right now. And so before we end the show, though, we are bringing in someone who is very important, who played a very pivotal role in Michigan State's win this last Saturday in Miami. And a lot of people were very curious about how the Spartans would hold up in the hot Miami heat. And one person on the Spartan staff who is getting a lot of credit for how MSU played is Amber Rinestine, the head football performance dietitian for MSU football. She too has been on the show before, so it's great to welcome her back in. Hi, Amber. How's your Monday treating you so far today?
It's good. It's been busy. How's yours?
It's been very busy as well. I hope we didn't disrupt the lunchtime schedule.
Oh, no, this is perfect. We're almost done.
Okay. Well, following the big win on Saturday, Kenneth Walker gave you a shout out when it came to preparing the Spartans for the hot Miami heat. So this is a very simple question, but how were you able to do that?
So it was honestly a collaborative effort between nutrition, strength and conditioning, sports science, our trainers here. We have been planning and working on this since March. This was not by accident. We have been looking over every piece of research we could have found and looking up every possible plan, talking to so many experts out there, just trying to see what would work, what would give us the best advantage. And I mean, obviously it worked well for us.
Yeah, and that was something, too, that we know that inside of the practice facility, the heat had been cranked up for at least ever since the beginning of fall camp that we were privy to being there for. But when it comes to since working on March from a nutritional standpoint or a hydration standpoint, what were you guys implementing? I don't know. Can you share that? I don't know if you want to give the secrets away, but.
So it really wasn't implementing anything. It was more education. So getting these guys ready to take the knowledge and use the knowledge. So they were more, adept to taking it and using it and working with it, because it wasn't a new concept. It was, we'd been practicing since March. So that's something I've always been very big on, is nothing's new for these guys. Everything is always a practice. And so I think practicing from March, they were willing and able to do everything possible because we had been telling them about it. Nothing was new. Nothing was a shock to them.
There's been an incredible amount of buy-in, and that's something that has been talked about for a while, ever since probably you guys all came on and Mel Tucker has come to East Lansing and the whole staff. But how much more did you see that buy-in on Saturday?
The guys have been bought in the entire time, but the trust was just insane. They were, if I said, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, and they trusted it immediately, there was no question to it. It was incredible. And that is credit to Coach Tuck and the environment he has created here.
And then now, as you guys transition into the Nebraska game, it being a night game, does the plan change from a nutritional or diet standpoint? It's a 7 o'clock kickoff versus a noon kick.
I'm so sorry. Can you say that one more time? It kind of broke up a little bit.
I was just saying, so now that you guys are transitioning to a night game against Nebraska, does the plan change at all from a nutritional or diet standpoint, just because it's a 7 o'clock game versus a noon kick?
So honestly, it's a lot easier on me because I'm able to get a lot more meals than these guys versus just having one opportunity at breakfast for a noon game. I get 4 opportunities. we have breakfast, we have lunch, and then we also have their pregame meal, and then we have our halftime. So I get a lot more fuel in these guys for an afternoon game, which is nice, versus the noon. But all of it presents its own challenges, and just adapt to it all.
All righty. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and have a great rest of your day, Amber.
Oh, of course. You guys too. Thank you for having me on.
Yep. All right. Had a lot to unpack there for today's show, Alex, from Steven to Ralph, Amber, and overall just trying to break down Saturday's big win against Miami.
Massive win.
Massive win.
Yes.
It really set, kind of what Ralph, I want to go back to what Ralph was mentioning about how the Big Ten is super, super loaded this year. And also, too, this goes back, though, to, remember when I said before the season started how people need to be kind of more on the lookout for Michigan State? Remember at Big Ten Football Media Days after coming back, and I had said that they are kind of underestimating them because, like, when Steven was here, we've been around it. We've been seeing it. We've been, unlike the national media or the national folks. And so that's why it's like, okay, obviously started the season with no votes in the rankings, but if you knew what was kind of going on, you'd give an understanding of it's warranted.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm right there. I was right there with you. I mean, just from looking on paper, I mean, with the turnover that he had, the additions, with the transfer additions that he brought in, I mean, at the very least, if you're taking a step back and looking at it, you would have to at least come to the conclusion that Michigan State should be better this year. I mean, they should have a better on-field product, and then obviously giving them the full year of coaching and implementing their game plans and their playbook and things like that. I don't think I thought that they would be this much better at this point in time. I am a little bit surprised. I mean, obviously pleasantly surprised. But I mean, they got this thing moving in the right direction. And I don't think it's a crazy surprise that they've got this ship kind of going in the direction that they do, just because of the people that they brought in. I think the biggest question was, and I think Ralph kind of brought it up too, was would they be able to gel this talent that they're bringing in? Because obviously, you're bringing in 15 transfers, a lot of new faces on the field. Could they, gel together and create that chemistry and play beyond themselves? And I think they are doing that. So I mean, that number one question I think has been answered. I don't think you can expect anything but improvement from here going forward.
Yeah, Nebraska will be interesting, just because you're coming off of a huge high of a win on Saturday against Miami. Michigan State essentially was the one who pulled off the upset. Nebraska is going to be wanting to come into Spartan Stadium, kind of do the same thing. And as I mentioned, the fans for Nebraska fans travel extremely well. Michigan State's trying to do a striped out theme for Saturday, which will be cool. Penn State, the whiteout. Not sure if you caught any of that Auburn-Penn State game.
I did not, no.
But, I mean, everybody in the stadium, not just the student section, everybody has a white pom-pom.
Nice.
And they should hand that out on Saturday. You should have the people in the sections with green who have green, give them a green pom-pom, and the people in the white section, give them a white pom-pom. And kind of do the same thing.
It should be. Even like just lay out a shirt for them, like a sponsored shirt or whatever the case may be, just so that everybody has that color. Even if you didn't come into the stadium with the correct one, like you can write that ship. So yeah, no, that'd be exciting. That's fun. I love that kind of stuff. I'm expecting a ton of energy, like you were saying. When Nebraska fans travel well, so I think they're going to be fighting for tickets, and this should be a pretty packed house, like about as packed as you can get it at Spartan Stadium. So it should be a great environment. And no, like you said though, you got to make sure that you're coming off of a big win. You don't want to get your heads too high or start looking too far down the schedule. I mean, it's obviously kind of easy to look at that Michigan game knowing that's on the horizon and how big of a game that's going to be with both teams playing so well right now. So. But I really don't expect them to. I think that's the kind of the culture that Mel has instilled in these guys is. I mean, you were even seeing him in the game when things weren't really going their way. He had that signal of just kind of keep chopping, keep going, keep trusting what you're doing, and good things will happen. So I don't expect them to, but I mean that's always a possibility. So you got to watch out for it.
Yeah, I don't anticipate them overlooking Nebraska I definitely don't think that they'll be looking ahead to Michigan.
No.
By any means. But yeah, a lot of people kind of might want to make something of that, especially since Michigan State's 20 now.
Yeah.
Michigan's 19.
Yeah, and I'm not too worried from a mental standpoint. Like I said earlier, I think Mel's got them mentally focused, but I think one thing that could be a concern is, they did play a tough physical game in the Florida Heat. So just physically, hopefully they got their legs underneath them, and they'll be able to come out and look fresh.
Well, that's what Amber and Jason Novak are for, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we will hear from Mel Tucker tomorrow. Tuesdays are his annual press conference to preview the next upcoming opponent for that week. And so he will, of course, get into Nebraska and any other questions that we decide to ask him. So that does it for our show today. Hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their Monday, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe.